federal judge in Seattle says he will try to rule by Tuesday on whether to temporarily block the city's new $15 minimum wage law from taking effect on April 1st. A group of franchise owners are suing the city, saying the law violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution because it would require franchises to comply with the higher wage much sooner than smaller, locally owned businesses. Joining us now from Seattle is David Jones, who owns 2 Subway franchises in Seattle, but is not part of this lawsuit. So, David, talk to me a little bit. What is it that, ordinary folks don't understand about the nature of franchises from your perspective that makes this current law kind of unfair?
Well, franchises make live off the bottom line like all small businesses, and then we pay a royalty to the corporation. So in our case, with Subways, we actually have lower volumes than the average restaurant volume in the United States, which is 709,000 a restaurant. We actually have lower than that. And the 4% is the average margin for restaurants. And so a Subway restaurant, when you do the minimum wage, we're under just as tough of a situation trying to come up with the money to pay for the minimum wage increase as everybody else. So if you put us on different scales, and part of the restaurant industry has 7 years while we only have 3 years, it means that we have to do things like raise prices sooner, and then it becomes an uncompetitive marketplace on the streets where we're at. So in my case, I have 2 Subways with 6 competitors on one and 8 competitors on another street, and in the case it's less than 50% are franchised and the rest are small business, so my prices have to be different than theirs, which makes it unfair for me.
Okay, so I actually have some sympathy to the franchise argument and this idea that, look, I know that you're looking at Subway or McDonald's or Holiday Inn, and so you think it's a big company, but it's actually a franchise. But let me ask this, isn't that really the problem of the relationship between the franchises and these multi-billion-dollar global companies? Shouldn't they be restructuring in a way that provides for a more fair relationship between you and that parent company rather than kind of balancing this on the back of low-wage workers?
Well, I don't think that's the issue. I know that's a soundbite right now, but that's not the issue. The issue is that if we have to increase prices like all businesses will, we will end up, even if we lose customers and we end up increasing our business by, let's say, 1%, which isn't enough, then the company actually makes more money, and the franchisee who lives off the bottom line will make less money because they didn't get their prices up enough to help pay for the whole minimum wage situation. So going after the corporation at all this is not an avenue to go after that. This is not the place to go after that. Right now, you're just affecting small business owners.
All right, so hold for me. Don't go away. But I want to come out to the table and ask about that, particularly my economist. Help me to adjudicate that claim a little bit, because I actually, I feel it. I feel the franchise, like, you get a franchise, you're a small business owner, this is one of the ways that you make a profit. On the other hand, I'm thinking, we're talking about Subway and McDonald's and these huge companies, and it does feel like they have just figured out a way to make this not about them, even though it is.
Yeah, and the franchisees should have some negotiating power to go to the big corporation and say, look, can we negotiate somehow the fees that I'm paying you each month to offset the additional wages that I'm going to be paying people? Overall, this could reward companies. I mean, this is if the people selling you your Happy Meal are actually happier because they're making higher wages, then maybe you'll get more people coming into the restaurant and your numbers will be better.
Well, right, and not just happier, but we know healthier, right? When people actually can afford health insurance, when people aren't, one of the things that happens, we talk about taxpayers end up subsidizing these massive corporations because people can't afford to buy food, to have housing, and so we end up through taxpayer money supporting through Section 8 housing, supporting through SNAP benefits, right? These multi-million-dollar corporations.
But I want to bring in to the minimum wage point. I think a better way of really attacking poverty, because minimum wage is kind of a scattershot approach. So even the Congressional Budget Office showed that people, when you increase the minimum wage, their projections, it was $10.10 from $7.25. They said that 29% of that benefit would flow to people earning 3 times above the poverty line, and only 19% for people below the poverty line.
Well, but that's great. But people people, but that's actually those people just because the poverty line is so low. Like I guess we say three times.
I mean, that's like,
but that's precisely the group of people. They're not.
But
this is precisely the group of people who got
poor. It's not the people.
It's not the poorest of the poor. It is. You are right. It is not the poorest of the poor. I think the earned income tax credit is a much better targeted and very specific use of tax.
But
wait a minute. I don't want to lose this because I think there's a way in which that's a red herring. It is not the poorest of the poor, and that is true. Correct. It is not. It is about saying for people who work full time in the United States of America, the idea that you would still be living in such close proximity to poverty, and particularly in all of these states that did not expand Medicaid, these are precisely the families that are in that hole and in that gap. If you can't have unions and you can't have minimum wage, I just don't know what it is we're going to do to lift people through work out of poverty.
Right, and I think it's really important to recognize that this benefit of raising the minimum wage to the levels that they're talking about in Seattle are not just going to accrue to the workers, they are also going to accrue to the business owners, and they're going to accrue to the local economy, right? This is a fundamental misunderstanding that people often have. We have to grow the economy from the middle out. And when people who go and shop, like Scott Walker, go to Kohl's, people who go and shop have more money in their pockets, it stimulates consumer demand. Now, there is the idea that franchise companies like Subway and McDonald's, they have more resources to draw on because it will take a while for the economy to grow and get that boost from more spending power in the pockets of working class people in Seattle. But fundamentally, this is going to be good for the economy overall.
So, Mr. Jones, if you had 5 years instead of 3 or 6 years instead of 3, would that make the difference?
I don't, you know what, the IFA is not suing for that reason. If I had 3 years or 5 years or 7 years, I would adapt to all of those. We want an even playing field. We want the minimum wage to be the same for everybody at the same time. When you make it uneven, then it is unfair, and it makes me struggle as a business owner. So we're not against the minimum wage. We're against the timetables being not the same.
And well, let's talk about this lawsuit because I think it's very interesting. The plaintiffs, the International Franchise Association, represents both the franchisors and the franchisees. And the idea is that there was no rational basis that the city could have had for treating Subway, which Subway employers, which have been recently found to be joint employers, fast food joint employers, with a mom and pop shop that doesn't have a massive corporation to draw resources from, to get advertising revenue from, to get the business models, the profit models. I mean, all of that comes from a massive corporation.
Right. So this is the point here: is that fairness may not actually be blindness. That sometimes fairness actually looks a little bit different than perfect equity. Thank you to David Jones in Seattle, Washington. Also, Heather and John are going to be back in our next hour. I want to say thank you to Scott Ross and to Carrie Sheffield. Coming up at the top of the hour, the Apple Watch.